This is my kitchen table and also my filing system. Over much of the past 3 decades, I've been an investor. The highest calling of mankind, I've often thought, was private equity. And then I started interviewing.
While I watch your interviews, I know how to do some interviewing.
I've learned in doing my interviews how leaders make it to the top.
I asked him how much he wanted. He said $250. I said, fine. I didn't negotiate with him, and I did no due diligence.
I have something I'd like to sell, and how they stay there. You don't feel inadequate now because being only the second wealthiest man in the world, is that right? In the long history of the British government, only one woman has served as Chancellor of the Exchequer, in effect, the Secretary of the Treasury of the British government. That woman is Rachel Reeves. I had a chance at Davos recently to sit down with Rachel Reeves and talk about her role as Chancellor of the Exchequer and the British economy. In your position, Chancellor of the Exchequer, you're the equivalent of the United States of the Secretary of Treasury,
yes,
but also the head of the Office of Management and Budget. Do you not prepare the budget for the government?
I do. I do also prepare the budget. We have an independent forecaster who provides the forecast and costs the policies that we put forward. But what is in the budget is my choice, the policies that I put forward. And we have an annual budget. I delivered the last of my budgets in November last year.
And in England, do you have to balance the budget or you can borrow money?
You can borrow money, but we're reducing that. I don't think that it is a good fiscal or economic policy to just constantly borrow, especially to pay for day-to-day spending. And for the last few years, like many countries, including the US, we've been running a budget deficit of around 5% of GDP. We are now bringing that down steadily. It will be just over 4%, I think, this year, then falling to about 3.5%. We've got the fastest rate of fiscal consolidation going on in the UK of any country in the G7. Our debt burden as a share of GDP is not too far off 100%. I want to bring that down. I also want to bring down the cost of servicing that debt, because at the moment, £1 in £10 of everything government spends is actually on debt interest. And so reducing government borrowing costs, which we managed to achieve last year, and reducing the debt burden as a share of GDP are two important priorities for me.
In the budget you proposed a tax increase. Is that very popular to do, and will you get it approved because you control the Parliament?
We do have a big majority in Parliament. When I became Chancellor, I inherited a bit of a mess fiscally and in terms of economic performance and the cost of living. And the previous government had made a number of spending commitments without saying where the money was going to come from. And what is called the reserve, which is set aside for emergencies, had been spent 3 or 4 times over just 3 months into the financial year. I had to put that right. That required a number of adjustments, both on spending and indeed on tax. When you come in as a business leader and you're taking on a business that has not been working well, that is not living within its means, does not have a clear plan, you have to sort it out. And I had to fix that mess. Now I'm being able to pursue my plans for growth and to ease the cost of living challenges. But that did require quite a big repair job to put the public finances on a solid footing again.
As we look in this calendar year, do you think the UK will grow at 2 or 3% or so? What kind of projections are you for GDP growth?
Real GDP growth expected to be around 1.5%. Obviously, nominal, that would be around 3.5% a year. I want growth to be faster than that. Last year, I think we'll come out as the second fastest growing economy in the G7 when all the numbers are totted up. But none of the economies in the G7 are growing as fast as we could, as fast as I think our potential is. And that's why, as a government, growth is our number one priority for Prime Minister Keir Starmer and myself. And our industrial strategy, backing sectors like AI and tech, clean energy, life sciences, and our defence sectors, focus on stability to bring down interest rates and inflation, investment, both public and private, in infrastructure, including ambitious plans for Oxford and Cambridge, and also in the north of England, and then deregulation, reforming our planning system to make it easier to get things done in Britain. And I think we'll start seeing the benefits of that pay off this year.
Now, many wealthy people who are not British by birth, who've moved to England in recent years, maybe to avoid their local country's taxes, have found that recently the non-dom taxes have increased dramatically in the UK, and they have left the UK. Has that been a problem, having wealthy people leave the UK, or it's not a big problem?
We want Britain to be a magnet for, wealth and talent, entrepreneurs from around the world. We did have quite an anachronistic system that if your father was born abroad, you could claim non-domicile for tax purpose in the UK. That wasn't fair. It's not a rule that any other country has. And so the previous government and now this government have got rid of that. We also made some changes around trusts and inheritance tax, although in the budget just in November we relaxed some of those rules so that for a flat fee you could take trusts out of your inheritance tax. So we have listened to feedback from wealthy individuals who perhaps want to make Britain their home or have already made Britain their home. We've also introduced a very generous scheme for people coming to the UK and wanting to bring foreign income and gains to the UK. Previously, they were taxed at normal rates of income tax. We have reduced that to try and encourage people to bring not just themselves and their talent, but their wealth to the UK. Britain is an open trading economy, and we have to be successful, open to business, open to investment, open to trade, and open to talent.
Now, the world has seen enormous amounts of growth in the technology space, particularly AI, and you've mentioned quantum is also coming along. But as you look back over the last couple years, if you grow up in the UK or the EU, you don't really rely to get through the day on European-built technologies. The technologies that are often the ones that people use are built in the United States. Why do you think that the entrepreneurs in the UK and the EU haven't yet built technologies that the whole world says, we need that technology, we need to have Facebook or a Google product or something like that? Is there any inherent reason you think it is, or just been bad luck for the last X number of years?
But I think that's a really good challenge, and your amazing tech companies like Google and Facebook and Apple, etc. We don't have one of those in the UK or indeed in Europe. We're very good at adopting new technologies in the UK, and that spurs productivity growth, which is beginning to pick up now in the UK. But we've also got some really exciting businesses on the frontier of new technologies like quantum and digital processing. So I think there are some exciting opportunities, and one of the things that we want to do with Oxford, Cambridge is to create a big link between those two universities. They're 60 or 70 miles apart, but there's no direct train link between them. There are some great towns and cities on that route between those two cities. We want to bring them together and create, our version, a British version of Silicon Valley in the UK, where we can really capture the creativity and the imagination of British founders and help them grow their businesses here. One of the challenges we've had in the UK is we've got loads of startups, but as they scale up, they drift towards America. The reforms we're making, particularly pension reforms to unlock long-term patient capital, to back venture capital, to back private equity in the UK, that is really exciting. We'll keep more of those businesses here. We're putting a load of tax incentives as well in the budget to back founders and entrepreneurs, and we're increasing the tax incentives to stay listed in the UK. So we're doing some exciting things, and I do think that will reap dividends too.
Now, in the United States, there's been a well-publicized feud between the President of the United States and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. And in effect, the President is saying, I should have more influence on what interest rates are. Would it ever occur to the Chancellor of the Exchequer to tell the head of the Bank of England, lower interest rates, or you just don't do that in this country?
No, since 1997, actually, the previous Labour Chancellor, Gordon Brown, granted operational independence to the Bank of England. It's Parliament that sets the inflation target. That's 2% for the UK. And then the bank have the tools of interest rates to meet that target. Now, look, I've worked at the Bank of England, and I have huge respect for that institution and believe that the way that we have good policy making is to take the politics out out of interest rate decisions, and I think that serves the UK economy well. We set fiscal policy as a government, and then the Bank of England set monetary policy, and I think that operational independence for central banks is one of the things that preserves stability and gives confidence to people to invest.
Now, 10 former chancellors of the Exchequer became prime minister, including Winston Churchill, among others. So have you ever thought about the possibility that you might follow in their path and be the first woman to be chancellor of the Exchequer and then prime minister?
I know that politicians often say, I don't want to do that job, but I really don't want to do that job. The job that I've always wanted to do in politics is to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. Before I became an MP, I worked in banking and financial services. I started my career as an economist at the Bank of England. And for me, being Chancellor is my absolute dream job, and it's the only job I want in politics.
Let's talk a bit about your background. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Lewisham in southeast London. My mum and dad were primary school teachers. I went to my local state school, and it was when I was at school that I got involved in politics. And the reason being, when I was at secondary school, our sixth form, where we did our final exams, was a couple of prefabricated huts in the playground, which was basically freezing cold in the winter or baking hot in the summer. Our school library was turned into a classroom because there were more students than there was space, and there were never enough textbooks to go around. And I felt very strongly that the governments that we had then in the 1980s and 1990s in the UK, Conservative governments, didn't care very much about schools like mine, the community in which I grew up, and I wanted to do something about it. And at the time, the leader of the Labour Party, the opposition party at the time, was Tony Blair. And I heard him say that his three priorities were education, education, education. And that really resonated with me, because I believe that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity isn't. But education can give everybody the opportunities that they deserve to fulfil their potential. And so that's why I got involved in politics, and why I got involved in the Labour Party.
And did you go to college?
I was the third person at my school to go to Oxford University. It wasn't a traditional route for people from my school to go to university at all, let alone to a university like Oxford. But I remember 2 years before I applied to go to Oxford, my head teacher at school giving an assembly and said, today, 2 girls from our school are in Oxford doing an interview to go to the university there, and we should all keep our fingers crossed for them all day, because it would be an amazing achievement for our school. And I thought, wow, I've never thought about something like that, but I'm one of the top performing girls in my year. Perhaps in a couple of years' time that might be something I could do. And it just sowed this seed in my mind that that was a possibility for someone like me and for a girl from the school like I was at. And so 2 years later, I did put in my application, and I got a place to read philosophy, politics and economics at Oxford University. I later went on to do a master's degree in economics at the London School of Economics. So I've been very blessed to have a very good education from some of the best universities and colleges in the UK. After
you got that education, did you sort of take a job at the Bank of England? Is that what you did?
Yes, yeah. My macroeconomics tutor at Oxford, he said that the Bank of England was a finishing school for economists, and I thought, yeah, that sounds like what I would like to do. And so I had an offer from an investment bank, and I had an offer from the Bank of England, and I chose the Bank of England because I wanted to be a proper economist, and also I've always strongly believed in public service, and so working for the Bank of England was a great job for me as my first job after university.
And how long were you there?
I was there for just under 6 years. I in fact, actually, whilst I was there as well, I had a brief secondment to Washington where I worked at the British Embassy as the second economic secretary, and that was in 2002, 2003. So, again, a time of huge volatility in the world, not long after 9/11, when the UK and US went to war in Iraq. And so it was a fascinating time to be in Washington, and I was reporting back to the UK Treasury and to the bank, and liaising with the US economic team as well.
So after you finished that tour of duty, you ultimately decided to run for Parliament?
Yes, I went and worked in the private sector for a bit. I worked for Halifax Bank of Scotland, which is now part of Lloyds Banking Group. I worked in retail banking, which is what took me to Leeds, where I'm now a member of Parliament. But
did you win the first time you ran?
No. It was the third time, actually, that I ran. I ran in what is traditionally a safe Conservative seat in the south of England, in Bromley, which is close to where I grew up. But then I got this job up in Yorkshire, moved up there. A safer seat became available, and I stood there.
Okay, so after you ran the first time, you didn't win, and the second time you didn't win, you didn't say, maybe politics is not for me?
No, the first time I stood, it was sort of like, for me, it was the first time I had done anything publicly political. I'd always been along to my local branch meetings of my party. I'd gone along to Labour Party conference, but I'd never had a sort of public platform for my politics. And I thought, well, I'll give it a go. I'll see what it's like and see if it's something that I would like to do in the longer term. So I was young when I first stood for Parliament. I think I was about 26. And then the following year, sadly, the MP I stood against, he died suddenly, and so there was a by-election. And so I stood again for my party. But it was 2010 that I first got elected to Parliament.
So it was 250 years ago that my country issued a Declaration of Independence and said to your country, we're breaking away. Do you think if the British government had said, look, forget the taxes we're imposing, let's be friends, the UK would still be part of the United States, or the US would be still part of UK, and would that make the world a better place, or you're happy with what happened?
I'm not going to go back 250 years and try and rewrite that period of history, but I am really proud of the strong ties, the cultural ties, the family ties, the business ties, the military and intelligence ties between our country. There's no greater partnership in the world than that between the UK and the US. And that's been true under different prime ministers, different presidents. We've got a very strong relationship between my Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and your President, Donald Trump. I think that serves both of our countries well. Doesn't mean we're always going to agree on everything. And that's the thing about the closest of friends. You don't always have to agree on everything. You can exchange views, and that is a healthy thing to do, but recognising that, what binds us together is so much stronger.
For foreign investors, people who live in the United States or in China or Asia, why should they invest their money in the UK?
This is an exciting time. You think about all of the growth sectors in the economy today, and those are all areas where Britain has real advantages, real strengths.
In the U.S., we have an aging population, and without immigration very much now, our population is aging much more than it has in the past. Does the UK have an aging population issue as well or not?
Yes, we do. I don't think it is stark as in some other countries. I think that, though, immigration policy, it is a challenge for all Western countries to get that balance right. And in Britain, we are building an immigration system and a visa system that is going to be all about, and is all about, attracting the best talent into the UK, because it's not just a numbers game. It's this the quality of the workforce that you're bringing into the UK. And we believe if you're attracting the top academics and researchers, the top entrepreneurs, the people who went to the best universities in the world, you're not displacing jobs. What you're doing is creating more wealth and opportunity. And so, we're doing a number of visa waivers for fee waivers for the top talent in the world to come to the UK. And we want to send out the message loud and clear that Britain wants to be a magnet for the best talent in the world.
With respect to the economy here, is it your view that the UK economy is going to grow somewhat like the EU economy? You're not going to outgrow the
We are outperforming.
You will.
Last year we outgrew Italy, France and Germany, and I think that will continue to be the same this year. We are an open trading economy with trade deals with emerging markets around the world, the best trade deal with the US. We've got great innovation going on through our universities and with our entrepreneurs and founders in the UK. We are a services-based economy, but also with amazing advanced manufacturing as well. So I think we are set up for success in the UK.
For foreign investors, people who live in the United States or on the continent in Europe or in China or Asia, why should they invest their money in the UK? Is the growth rate good enough to attract capital? Are the regulations fair enough and easy enough? Why should somebody invest in the UK?
Well, the UK stock market was one of the best performing stock markets in the world last year. The FTSE 100 went up by just over 21%. So pretty good returns on your investment. We have got in the UK 4 of the top universities in the world with some amazing businesses spinning out of those universities in life sciences, in quantum, in AI, increasingly in the defence sector and dual use technologies. So there's tons of exciting stuff happening in the UK. We've got some amazing unicorn businesses that have started and are now scaling up in the UK, and we're making it easier for businesses to list and to raise finance in Britain. So look, this is an exciting time. You think about all of the growth sectors in the economy today, and those are all areas where Britain has real advantages, real strengths. And so that's why I think that this is going to be Britain's year, and I'm really confident.
So what do you do in your spare time? I assume you can't be Chancellor of the Exchequer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Are you an athlete? Do you collect anything? Do you have any hobbies? What do you do on the outside?
Well, I've got 2 children who are aged 12 and 10, so they keep me pretty busy when I'm not working, and I love spending time with them. I had a wonderful time over Christmas and New Year where I got to indulge in a bit more cooking, which I don't have time for very much with the usual cut and thrust of work and politics. Also a keen runner and try and go running several times a week, and very lucky, very blessed in London to live near the beautiful royal parks in London, and so make use of running through those.
If you're running in the park, do people come up to you and say lower taxes or anything like that? Does that ever happen?
I try and go running quite early in the morning to avoid that sort of thing and keep my head down.
And your children call you Chancellor, or they just call you Mom?
I mean, Mum is about the politest thing they'll call me. No, they're wonderful children, and they absolutely keep me grounded. They've got very strong views and very strong principles already themselves, and I'm incredibly proud of them.
Final question is, I've often thought the best titles in the world for a job you can have are Supreme Allied Commander, President of the World Bank, Chief Justice of the United States, and Chancellor of the Exchequer. So do your friends call you Rachel? They call you Chancellor, Miss Exchequer? What do your friends call you now that you're Chancellor of the Exchequer?
I'm just still Rachel to them. But the other day, I bumped into the head of MI6, our security service, and I was with my 12-year-old, and I said, this woman is the head of MI6, our security service. And my daughter said, that is a much cooler job than my mum's. So I was certainly put in my place.